I had a manufacturing company. I still have the company, but I don't. There doesn't have any assets anymore because I sold it all actually. But for about 30 years, I had a manufacturing company that was building, had nothing to do with electric vehicles or anything. We built shipping cases and carrying cases. It was interesting. It was a business really that was like an endless stream of spatial puzzles to put together. So it was engaging, but it was not highly technical, but it was a good business. And then in 2008, I got this idea, just sort of a personal challenge, to convert an internal combustion engine vehicle into electric. And I should step back just momentarily, even a little bit further. I'm not an engineer. I have a fairly crappy high school diploma, actually, to be quite frank with you. So, but all my life I almost went into engineering, but I did not for various reasons. And but I'm sort of a student of life, and I'm fascinated with kind of all kinds of things. I kind of go from one obsessive thing to the next. The world is fascinating, and if you look at things long enough, you'll always find something interesting, and I tend to dive into those things for some amount of time until like some other shiny thing attracts my attention and I move on to it. So I'm a little bit all over the place, and I would describe myself as a generalist. So I'm not, I know a little bit about a lot of stuff, and some things I get a little deeper in. But anyway, I had this, I sort of give myself a personal challenge to do this electric vehicle conversion, and quite honestly, I wasn't even sure it was going to work, and I had no experience with electric drives or any of this stuff. It was just seemed like a cool idea, and I didn't understand why the technology wasn't being used in this part of the world. Because in 2008, there were no electric vehicles, and I'm not sure that there was any that were functioning that were in Saskatchewan. There was none in Saskatoon. I had heard that there was a vehicle at one time, but it wasn't being driven anymore. So I figured there must be a reason why this wasn't working, and I wasn't sure what it was, but I thought probably the winter was going to be the reason, and I was fully prepared that this project wouldn't even succeed, that it would just be a exercise, and I'd get to the end of the rainbow and realize that, oh, this is why it doesn't work. But I didn't know what it was. I figured it was going to be the cold. Anyway, spent 2008, or a major portion of that, just researching electric vehicle drives and conversion specifically, because that's what I was setting out to do, is to convert a vehicle. So basically giving myself about a 6 to 8 month education in electric vehicle drive systems. And then I found there was very few vendors at that time. Even if you went out and wanted to buy components to do a conversion, there was a very, very small group of vendors out there that had the components that you could go and purchase. I picked some pieces, bought them, and then I probably spent about 3 months sitting at my bench staring at a schematic that I didn't understand and trying to figure it all out and getting some help from friends and whatnot, and it was good. Made it through. The thing worked. In December of 2008, I turned it on for the first time and drove around the block, and some things didn't work right. A couple days later, it was fixed up and going. It had lead acid batteries and a DC motor. It was a very low-tech electric vehicle, but I licensed it January 1st, 2009, and it's running today. My daughter, who goes to university, drives the thing every day. I mean, I like driving the thing, but I can't get it because she's always got it, because it's, it's free to operate. It's a nice little truck. It's fun to drive, actually. It's not very comfortable, but it is very fun to drive. It's got about 40,000 kilometers on it now. I did change the battery pack on it. Am I getting into too much detail on this? Because I don't know what you guys really want to hear, but whether you want technical stuff or more innovation stuff, but I'll just keep asking. I'm not offended if we need to, if you want to take it a different direction at any given time, because I can sit here and talk for probably 2 days. So anyway, it's originally I put lead acid batteries in it, and because I was really so unsure about whether the thing was even going to work, I even just made a makeshift box and put the batteries in the back of the truck, like it was carrying a load of batteries, because I was thinking I was probably going to take this out and have to put the gas motor back into the truck, you know, like. So anyway, but it worked really well, so then I took it off the road. You know, I should also mention that before that, before I actually drove that thing around the block the first time, I'd never been in an electric vehicle other than a golf cart. You know, I had never even driven or walked up to an EV of any kind. And so this was all like, I mean, you want to talk about learning on the fly. I mean, and even how to drive the thing was, everything, I had every possible, what would you say, the right word, but the apprehensions or, it wasn't so much apprehensions, but misconceptions is probably the best way of putting it about what an electric vehicle was before I ever got behind the wheel of the one I did. Things like range anxiety, which are huge, and almost everybody that's never driven an electric vehicle, before they do, has range anxiety. Everybody thinks, oh, I'm going to get someplace, I'm going to run out of charge. You know, I got to be able to plug in someplace. I mean, it's natural. I know that because I had all of that stuff. I thought, oh, I'm going to be tied to I'm going to have an extension cord with me all the time. I'm going to be tied to a power plug. You know, I thought it was going to be really restricting. I mean, even before I started driving it to work, I mean, I took Google Maps and I planned the absolute shortest route from my front door to where I was working, you know, so make sure that I wasn't going to get stranded. And a really weird thing happened, and that is that after I started driving it, I would say in about, somewhere in the span of about between 1 to 2 weeks of driving that, and this was January, you know, it's the coldest month of the year, I realized that not only did it work, that it was unbelievable to me that technology had not been, was not being used. You know, it'd been overlooked, you know, for a long, long time. And it really, for certain applications, it's absolutely the best technology. And I didn't know anything about it up until really that time when I was learning. But anyway, back to the point is, after I started driving it, the actual opposite of all the apprehensions turned out to be true. And that was really exciting for me. I realized that I did not have to worry about where I was plugging in. I didn't have to be plugged in all the time. I didn't have to really worry about it. As a matter of fact, I didn't feel limited by the thing. Every morning it's full. You know, I plug it in at night, and in the morning it's full. So I didn't understand that was going to be that way, but when I really understood it was, I think it was April, I decided to change to take this load out of the back of the truck and finish the job. I hadn't finished it, you know. I didn't spend the time on polishing it, you know, like designing the enclosures and raising the bed and making everything. So I wanted it to just look like a truck, you know, not like an electric truck. And I took it off the road thinking that I would be done in about a week to 10 days is what I thought it would take me to do it. And it turned out that part of the conversion was, it was a game of millimeters that went on for, I think it was 6 weeks that I couldn't drive the car, because it took me, it was hard to fit everything in. It was a real difficult challenge. But anyway, and during that time, I had to switch back to driving my Jeep to and from work, which is a gas vehicle. And I can tell you, the first, while I was driving that Jeep, I have never felt so tied to the gas pumps as I had, you know, I had never thought of it that way even before. And then what I realized is the electric vehicles there's freedom with the electric vehicles, and it's so much better as a commuting vehicle than a gas-powered vehicle. So there was all these revelations going on. It was like, you know, it's like complete opposite thinking of what I had, you know, even maybe 3 months before that. You know, it was really made me realize that this technology is we really we're missing it. And so anyway, I started to look at this because it was working so well. Fast forward a little bit, I think it was August that year, I moved my business from the north end to the south end. And I won't spend too much time on this part, but I had started off checking these were lead acid batteries, checking the fluid levels in the batteries. Like I was doing it once a week, and it was always the same, you know. And I was about once a month I would have to add hard, you know, a little bit of distilled water to these batteries, and it was like, wow, you know, don't need to. Obviously, it's not a big requirement, nothing to worry about. And so I wasn't checking it as often. I was only checking it once a month. And then when I moved my business, I got really distracted for like three months. And without realizing it, I stopped checking the fluid level in my batteries. And one day I went to leave work. I'd had it plugged in, and it backed out of the parking spot, and then it stopped. And I looked back, and there was like smoke coming out of the back, and I thought, oh, you know, I jumped out of the truck, and it was like smoke coming out of it. It wasn't smoke; it was steam. And what had happened was my lead acid batteries had the level had gone down, and then which probably most of you guys in the room know, but I learned the hard way, is that you know, thermal runaway on these things, that it isn't this nice long line on the graph down to no water in the battery. It's a line that goes down very gradually and then drops like this, and I destroyed the lead acid pack, which was a blessing in disguise, because then I immediately switched to lithium iron phosphate batteries, and those are that's the same pack that's running in it now, and it's far superior technology on a lot of different levels. And so, you know, School of Hard Knocks, it cost me a couple $1,000 in batteries, but that sort of moved me ahead into a battery technology I should have been using in the first place, but didn't know anything about, and the learning sort of started over again. But I kind of lost my track on that one, but anyway, yeah, okay, I know where I was. I was running this thing. Now I had lithium iron phosphate batteries in it, and I had finished it. It was a finished product, and then I was looking at it thinking, okay, how can I commercialize this? Because it's not being, you know, what can I do I wanted to try and find a way of, you know, making a business out of this technology, because it was good. It was like gold I stumbled across, you know, and so I was looking, I had ideas about how to try and get a business going that was utilizing electric vehicles, but nothing was really gelling anyway, and I was sort of plugging away at it. And you know, when I was doing the conversion, I remember saying to my wife in the garage, which I've kind of disappeared out of my wife's life for about 8 months. Like I don't know how many hours, I didn't log the hours, and it's probably good I didn't, but I mean, I spent, if I wasn't at work or sleeping, I was in that garage trying to figure out how to make this thing go, you know, and put it together. And I should say also, my garage is like, it's a real collective of equipment. Like, it's a machine shop, there's a milling machine, and there's a lathe, and there's a welder, and there's every kind of woodworking tool. I mean, I have accumulated, all my entire life, I accumulate tools. Because I'm a generalist, I like to do just about everything. I dabble in everything, you know, like, and so my you know, my workshop also then became an electronics lab, by default, you know, so an electrical lab, and so I spent all this time in there. But anyway, it was just this technology was just working so fantastically, and I could see that for some applications that this was absolutely clearly better than an internal combustion engine. There are applications, and they're just changing though even now. At that time anyway, you know, my truck had 130 kilometers of range on a single charge, and that was, you know, that's the operating envelope. And if you put a payload in it, it reduces, and if it's really cold, it reduces a bit further. So, you know, it has certain work that it can do. But as a commuter vehicle in almost any, you know, any city within a long ways from here, if you have a commute, this truck would do it, you know, no problem. And it does it cleanly. You know, it's kind of guilt-free driving. It's you know, like, just go. And you can plug in anywhere. You can plug in, you know, at wherever you plug your block heater in the wintertime, you can plug it in, and it can be always full at most places. So anyway, I was trying to commercialize this thing. I had said to my wife that, you know, I bet this would be good in a potash mine. And I was just looking at this and going, you know, there's no zero emissions, cool little vehicle. If this works, it would be good in a potash mine. And I promptly forgot about that. And didn't think about it until I think it was April of 2010 now. So I've been driving that truck for well over a year. And a guy who did some work for me, my adapter plates that needed to be cut out of aluminum to adapt the motor on. Initially I had a transmission, and after I had the transmission in, when I took that all out, and it just direct drove the rear end, because the transmission is just, you don't need it. You pin it in a gear anyway. So you know, less moving parts, it just, the better. Simple's best. And anyway, I was sitting at work one day, and the telephone rang, and this guy worked at PCS Corey out here, and he had talked to his boss, who was looking at electric vehicles, which I was completely unaware of it, and they had tried one that day, and it failed miserably. And the guy said to his boss, well, I know a guy who's built and drives an electric truck, you should talk to him. And the guy said, yeah, and he called me and invited me out to the mine. I went out the next week. I'd never even been to a potash mine before, you know, I didn't know, I'd never been underground, I mean, all that. And drove my truck out there, took a couple of the guys, before we went underground, took a couple of guys for a ride in my truck just out the driveway and back, you know. And they were like, this is exactly what we need. And I'm like, no, I didn't say this, but I'm thinking, no, this isn't exactly what you need, but great that you think that, you know. And then we went underground and looked at the types of vehicles, what they wanted to replace. And I had talked to him on the phone, and I knew he wanted a light utility vehicle to replace the diesels that are underground. And so I had done a little bit of work in the week before I went out there, and I was thinking totally in terms of conversion. I would buy something, strip out the internal combustion engine components, and then convert it to electric, make a product and sell it, and look after it that way. And I even, you know, much to my wife's credit, you know, like the night before I was going out there, she was like, well, do you have anything you're going to give them to show them? And I'm like, no, I'm just going to go out and talk. And she said, no, you got to give them, you got to show them something. So like I spent like 4 hours with, I took images off the internet and photoshopped it a little bit longer, so because I knew it was going to have to be a little bit longer. So I took a Kawasaki vehicle and photoshopped it into this electric thing and took it out there and said, well, it made it look really professional, this little glossy page, and went to Staples and had it printed on some real thick glossy cardstock, you know. Come in with a bunch of specs that, I'm not kidding you, those were pulled directly out of my arse, you know, like I had some numbers to go by because of my truck, but I had no idea even what this thing was going to be, other than it was going to look something like that. What it was going to be is whatever they wanted it to be. That was that's my whole thing going out there. So they gave them this glossy thing, and they're like, oh yeah. Before I left there that day, a handshake deal, and they had agreed to, I think they agreed to pay me $29,000 for a prototype of this thing that I had photoshopped the night before. And where did $29,000 come from? I just thought to myself, I gotta make I've got to charge them enough money. I don't want to charge them so much money that they're not going to go for it. Okay, they're going to go, oh, it's too expensive. But I've got to make sure that it's enough money that I know that they're really serious. So I thought $30,000 maybe. 29 sounds better, and that's what we agreed to. And a couple of weeks later, there was a PO for that, and bang, that was the beginning of Papa Bravo Innovations. I didn't know that quite yet, but it was SBC Case Industries at the time, and I had a fabricator that has been with me for 30-some years, and actually, it's kind of funny. I had bought SolidWorks, a subscription to SolidWorks, like in 2007, to use doing case designs and stuff. I didn't use it very much. It was too cumbersome, and I just never had the time, but I liked it. It was cool, you know, like 3D modeling. I thought that this is awesome, you know, like the fact that you can download the programs to CNC machines, etc. It was like, wow, this is a new tool into the repertoire that's pretty awesome. So anyway, I got my SolidWorks fired up and started designing this thing. Or first I went out and bought this Kawasaki mule that I had photoshopped and tried to, was getting ready to, I had it all, I hadn't torn it apart yet, but I was looking at all the dimensions, and I was going to draw the Kawasaki mule in SolidWorks and then work with that as my platform for design. And as I'm going through all this, these contortions about looking at this Kawasaki mule, it occurred to me, it's like, why am we doing it this? Why am I doing it this way? I'm taking what all the conversions are is taking something that was created to be this and trying to reshape it into something that it's not. And I had already gone through this painful exercise with this truck for, you know, the better part of a year, and there's problems with that, and so what I looked at and is that to really solve this problem correctly is I needed to design a pure electric platform. It's like, why do we do this? You know, why would I try, and why do we need to go with all this other work? Well, one of the reasons is I looked at it and I thought, well, I mean, a rolling chassis has brakes and wheels and tires and signal lights and horns and roll cages and seats that, you know, the sort of what do you call it, the human factors of a vehicle, they're done. You know, it's just like, you can just do the simple mechanical stuff of ripping out this and putting this in, but there's always a compromise with a conversion. You are limited now by the payload that vehicle was designed for. It was not designed to be electric. So now I want to put all these batteries in, and range is what everybody wants. And so you get this, there's always a compromise. And you either give up payload space or payload capacity to make a conversion into, to make an internal combustion converted into electric. And it's not designed for the components that you want to put it in. And so it's just one gigantic pain in the ass is what it is, and it's a challenge, and so that there's a fun part of that, but in the end you end up with a conversion, and so I thought, why don't I design something from the ground up? So I went back and met with the guy who had given me the PO to do the Photoshop thing, and I said, you know what? I don't think we should do this. For the same amount of money, I'll build you a dedicated electric vehicle. We'll build one that's purpose-built as an electric vehicle. And he looked at me and he said, well, on one condition, that this thing does not look like a doom buggy that you built in your garage. And I just said, look, if I do it, it won't look like it was built in somebody's garage. It'll be a professional thing. He said, okay, fine. He let me go and do it. And so then I went, and at the same time, learning SolidWorks on my own, and that is not a good way of learning SolidWorks, by the way. If any of you have SolidWorks experience, you want to talk about bad habits? Well, I still battle with some of the things that I taught myself in the beginning, and I basically designed this little quarter-ton two-wheel drive unit that was to their specifications. They had, I was very good. I should go back again and say that my previous business of building cases and harnesses and bags and this kind of thing, I did a lot of military contracting over those years, and I worked with General Dynamics very closely, and we were actually we were their kind of main go-to company in Canada. If they had any kind of electronic gear that they needed to transport, they generally came to us, and I generally did the design. And so I understood requirements, and I understand, you know, how to extract requirements from customers, and I understand that the customers never tell you accurately what the requirements are because they never know when the job starts. So I already knew how this was going to go, but I worked with them to say, okay, we need some working specs, and we got those things, and it was length. It had to be 120 inches long or less, so it would fit in their cage, so they could put it down underground without slinging it, which is another big story. Story. But anyway, I had this set of specifications, went to work, trained myself poorly to operate SolidWorks, basically designed this automobile. And I made it all up as I went along. It's actually quite comical when I think back to the process. And, you know, but it worked, you know, but, you know, like, give you an example, it's just one long chain of problem solving, okay? Like, everything was a problem that needed to be solved. I mean, even the software was a problem that had to be solved. And the problem is I only had so much time, so I didn't solve the software problem until, unfortunately, I had the model half done. And now the first half of that model, you can just imagine what a mess that thing is. You know, like, I don't even think, like, if I open that model today, which I still have, like, it's just like, I look at some of those parts and I go, I have no idea how I created these parts, you know, like every part was created differently. Okay, I got to make this part up here in the front end, and my strategy for building that part would be what it was on Monday. And then Wednesday, I had to build a part on the rear end. My strategy on Wednesday was not anywhere related to the strategy I'd used on Monday. And so now I have this Frankenstein's monster of methodology for building the models, which was randomly changing depending on my mood. And it was quite funny, actually. And boy, when engineering folks started joining my group in late 2010, they weren't all that happy with the model I created, let's say. But the concept was good for the prototype. And what's remarkable is, I mean, if I do say so myself, is that contract was let late in May of 2010, and we delivered a functioning prototype that was designed and built from the ground up. We can't do that now. No, I mean, we're worse. It's because we're more thorough, and you know, we're generating models that are much more professional. But we can't get a vehicle built and designed that fast now, and we've already done it time and time again. So, I mean, it was stuff like, you want to talk about problem solving, you know, it's like, when you're modeling stuff, you know, and you want to design the operator compartment, it's like, how far is that dashboard actually away from the seat, you know? Like, it's like, it doesn't work. I mean, yeah, I used to get download these models of people that you can mash around, you can set them in there and look at it. But what we did was, I just went to my garage and started chopping up 2x4s and hardboard and hot glued an entire vehicle together, and it sat in the office right next to my desk, you know, and we moved the seats around, and I mean, it was, and you know, it's interesting because I didn't know anything about the process, you know, we were just making it up as we were going along, you know, but then even just recently I was looking at some of the methodology that some big companies are using, and I can't remember, they call those, can't remember what it's called, there's a word for those, it's kind of an oddball word for these big wood models that you can sit in and do the sort of ergonomics on it, you know? So we accidentally did the right thing, you know? But it was, that we delivered that vehicle, and they had told us when we delivered it that they normally tested vehicles for 1 year before they would decide if they would adopt them or not. And we delivered it in October, and 1st of January we had a production order for 4 production units of that for that mine. And even more, even bigger and better was, in those few months after they had it, I spent a lot of time underground. Like, I spent a lot of time in the mine, like more than I wanted to spend. But it was very educational, because I understood, after a few weeks, I understood how the operation worked. And one of my talents is to be able to look at these situations and see kind of what makes them tick, you know. I figured it out right away. You know, you look at the maintenance department. The maintenance department in a mine is the heartbeat. And whether anybody wants to recognize it or not, whoever's in charge of maintenance, they have probably as much power as anybody in that mine in terms of what equipment they purchase. Because if they don't like it, the guys won't buy it. You know, and if they say, this is what we want, that's what they buy. And looking at their maintenance department, they had this long lineup of vehicles, and I said, what's that? What are those all about? Well, they're all waiting for a new engine, new CV joints, this big list of all the things that were wrong with all those vehicles. And you know, this is the other thing that, you know, in trying to make these things work and understand, you know, to find an opportunity, you know, where you can, you know, come up with some innovation that, I mean, innovation is nothing if there's no customer, you know, like, I mean, that's the thing, is that the greatest idea on the planet isn't, I'm not saying it's not good, but to me, esoteric design that requires a rich relative to fund, you know, like if you don't have a customer that's paying you money, you know, what are you doing it for, you know, unless it's a hobby, you know, and nothing wrong with hobbies, but, you know, you've got to realize if a person wants to make a living at something, you've got to have a customer. And to have a customer, you've got to give them what they need, not just what they want, but it does have to be what they want ultimately, but it's got to be what they need. And looking at a mining operation, and is you look at a mining operation and quickly you look at it and go, oh, okay, what makes a mine money is getting ore out of the ground, okay? Not repairing personnel carriers, okay? The maintenance department needs to work on things like scoops and things that move ore out of the ground, because that's what makes them money. So what became obvious to me, and it seems obvious to everybody when I say it, but it's you know, it's all things are obvious after they're out on the table, is that the opportunity was there that if it's like their maintenance department doesn't have enough people, they never have enough people. That was something I learned in, like, I talk a lot to people, so when I was in the mine, I'm talking to everybody all the time, and I ask questions. Questions are the gold, you know, and the answers to the right questions and the answers to those, if you really listen carefully, that's where you find the opportunities, okay? We have to understand you have to meet a requirement and fit in. And what I realized is, if we were successful with our vehicles, the electric drives have so little maintenance in comparison to a diesel or underground. They're just simple. The systems are brutally simple. They're beautifully simple, you know, and it's great technology, especially that way. And if we could bring value so now they don't have a lineup of vehicles that the guys have to repair. The guys can work on the things that move ore, okay? Now, how much is that worth to a mine? Well, in asking questions, I asked them questions about, well, how many tons of potash do you guys produce in a shift, you know? And the answers, when I went back and then paired them up with what potash was selling for on the market at that time, it's like, holy crap. These guys are pulling like $20 million a day out from underground. Okay, so let's just do a little quick thought. If you can positively impact on that kind of flow, okay, you don't have to have very significant impact for it to be worth a lot to them. And so I was able to show them a business case that says, you know, you don't have to have your guys working on this stuff. You don't have to have all the costs associated with handling diesel fuel. The other thing is that things like, obvious things like emissions, you know, I mean, diesel emissions are a known carcinogen, and it's only a matter of time before they're illegal, you know. Well, what are these operations going to do if their entire production methodology is based on something that's now illegal, diesel, you know, like, they're going to be in a bad spot at some point in time, and even before that, there's risk of litigation. Now, I'm not saying we didn't use scare tactics to try and sell them on these things, but you have these discussions, and they already know it. They just don't talk about it, you know. But now all of a sudden you bring the solution to them that it's like, oh, well, this is exactly what we need, you know, and we need as many of them as you can build. And in 4 years, we ended up putting close to 80 trucks into potash mines underground. And I'll go back a little bit because I didn't finish this part, but they gave us this production order for 4 of these, we call it gopher. We named them gopher. My naming, I struggled with this for weeks and weeks and weeks about what we're calling these things, you know. I decided to make the whole line burrowing animals. So the quarter ton was a gopher. And when I was in the mine, after they had their initial prototype unit, we were driving around, and they loved that prototype. Like, I mean, you want to talk about a customer that just swallowed the hook, line, sinker, pole. My arm was down in this guy's throat, you know, like, I mean, we couldn't do anything wrong. The vehicle, even when it wasn't working the way it was supposed to, they didn't care. You know, it's like, yeah, can you guys come out and fix this, blah, blah, blah. It's like, sure, and I keep expecting someone to go, you know, these things aren't working very well, and they're like, oh man, we love this thing, you know, and I'm like, good, that's great. And while in there, we're driving around, and the guy said, hey, do you think you could do a Toyota Land Cruiser? I said, yeah, sure. That's a 3/4 ton 4-wheel drive truck, you know. I said, yeah, I'm sure we could. Well, figure out what it'll cost and what you think you can do. So I went back and did some out-the-ass calculations again for what I thought it would cost. Gave them this price. They gave me a PO to design a 1-ton 4x4 pickup truck. At the same time, they gave us the first production order for these things. It's like, holy cow, these guys want this stuff so bad. We can't, you know, this is like the best thing that could ever happen. You got this customer that's got a lot of money, and all they want is everything we can produce, you know, like, and things we haven't even produced yet, you know. So it looked really positive. And because I'd been in business for 30 years, or I guess at that time it wasn't, it was 25 years, and struggling at time from, you know, most of the time in a very competitive industry, the very notion of having a customer like PCS that has all this money and will to spend it if you've come up with the right solution, this was just completely, this was like I was in some kind of a dream, you know, like this couldn't be real, you know. So I was a little bit hesitant to jump in too quick, but when they gave us that contract for 3 vehicles they had never seen before, and another contract for one we hadn't even thought of it yet, you know, like we didn't even know how we were going to build the thing yet. I realized, okay, here's an industry that is archaic, that needs innovation. Nobody on the planet, still couldn't believe this, nobody was doing it. Anywhere on Earth, on planet Earth, nobody was building an electric truck, a half-ton or a 1-ton pickup truck. Yeah, it's conversions here and there, but nobody was building a pure electric truck for this industry that so obviously needed them and wanted them, you know. Sought me out, you know, like, I mean, you want to talk about a lucky phone call, you know, like, anyway, when you realize this, I did jump in really kind of over my head, but at the same time I looked at this and I thought, this is going to be, if I do a good job, if we do a good job, this will succeed. This is a great way to go down. So we went full speed. That our 1 ton, which is the Badger, well, I mean, this is how crazy it was. We had the contract to develop this 1 ton Badger 4x4 pickup truck, okay? And before we had even delivered it, in fact, we showed some of the guys from the mine came, and our first prototype. I mean, if I should have put some slides together, but I didn't know we were going to talk. I was going to go on to this stuff, but this prototype that I took people for rides in. If you could just imagine a unpainted, rusty steel frame that we had put together with wheels and the drive stuff on it, a steering wheel that sticks up, and a seat that literally is just like, I think we had screwed 2x4s onto the thing, so and it was just temporarily there. 2 seats. I took guys for a ride around the block on this skateboard. This electric skateboard is what it was basically. And within I don't know how long, a few weeks after that, I had a meeting out at one of the other potash mines, and they said, "Can you build us a bus?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure we can." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, this will be good." And so we got a contract to build a bus, actually 2 buses, that had to be delivered by the end of that year. This was like June. They have June of 2011. While we still haven't developed the first platform, we got a contract to build another platform we hadn't even developed yet. Now, it turns out we realized pretty quickly that we needed to use modular concepts, because if we're going to have to create all these different variants of vehicle, so we build it like Lego. I've been playing with Lego since I was like 3, and Lego is the greatest thing on the planet, and so everything is Lego to me. If it isn't Lego, then I haven't figured out why I can't see that it's Lego, and that's my sort of philosophy. And so we designed these vehicles to be completely modular in design, and we delivered 2 buses and a Badger. We didn't even start the Badger development, I don't think, until March, and we delivered Badgers and what we called armadillos, which were really a Badger, a stretch limo version of a Badger, in the end of December. So we developed 2 truck platforms that we had never done, didn't even know what they were going to be, January 1st, and delivered 2 new vehicles that were production vehicles. Like, they were ready to go into production, and in less than 12 months. Like, I mean, that was intense, you know. But then when we had these finished vehicles, like, and back to what makes some of this stuff, why it was good. You know, I mean, I assembled a really good team really quickly of engineers, an electrical engineer, mechanical engineer, and then we had a lot of tech. We had a couple of techs, electrical techs, and sort of a few people that were sort of jacks of all trades that were involved very early, and very creative people, very, very creative people. And you know what? I mean, I don't always get it right over the years. Sometimes I hire duds. I've done it, and it's, you know, but most of the time it's been good, you know. And I put special attention on these people when I hired them, that they had to be creative minds. And almost all the engineers, not universally, actually, no offense, but the engineers really didn't fall into this category, but the other people around that, the techs and sort of the other people that were very heavy enthusiasts and very passionate about this, they were all artists. They were technical but artists, somehow in their own right. So they weren't, you know, it was a very creative bunch, and then you put the creative people, and I'm not saying the engineers weren't creative, but, you know, I mean, engineers, they know their, you know, the good ones know their stuff, and it's highly technical. Some are very creative too, but a great combination of technical expertise, creativity, and the other thing I would say, and this has always been a pet peeve of mine working with companies previously that were heavy engineering is, again, don't take this wrong, but engineers tend to sometimes think that they know everything and often want to only do things the way they want to do it, and are not always, and this is a gross generalization, so I apologize, but it is my experience that up to that point, okay, I'll qualify it and say that it tended to be that not always open-minded free thinkers. Now, that my attitude has changed a lot because the people that came in, the engineers that came into my group then, were very open-minded, no egos. My organization has always been very flat. Everybody, try and engage everybody, and everybody's important. Like everybody has their role to play in it, and brainstorming and creativity is, that's where this stuff comes from. These vehicles that we built are, I wish I had one here. There are works of art in their own. They're technical, and I'm talking about the newer stuff. The original one that I did, it's not that awesome. Okay, it had leaf springs in the back, and if you were in the back seat, you'd get your teeth knocked out if you went over a bump. It wasn't my thing, but it was okay. It was good enough to get this thing going. But then we made, some of the guys from U of S that came in had worked on the, what's that team? Husky Motorsports. In fact, two of the guys were heavily involved in it at different times. And those guys just live and breathe automobiles and suspension and frames and all this kind of stuff. And that's exactly what we needed. And they absolutely love the work that they were doing at that time in particular, when it's all new, they were creating, they could come to work in the morning and have a problem, come up with a part, and literally we'd have that part fabricated and be bolting it onto the truck before the end of the day. You want to talk about a fast cycle, and we were very undisciplined, and but we moved at the speed of light, and I used to think at the time, well, disciplined atmosphere that we have here, we don't track all of our changes very well, and we don't, we're not doing all the paperwork that we should, and I used to think this is bad. And there are things about it that were bad, from a business point of view. It created nightmares that you had to deal with later. But what I know now is that the environment is much different now. It's no longer my company that's building these vehicles. And it's a very structured, established company that purchased the intellectual property and still builds the equipment, and all the people came across. And I worked there as well. But the engineering process is the engineering process that you would expect an engineering process to be. It's very, it's rigid, it's thorough, all the checks are in place, everything, and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but what I know is that's a slow thing, okay? And so there's compromise, everything is compromise, if you go for total speed, then it's very difficult to have a disciplined, well-disciplined process. But if you go for a well-disciplined process, it's very difficult to have speed. And so where we are now is kind of somewhere in this zone in the middle, which is not very fast. It kind of drives me crazy now, actually, because I was used to everything going like that. We built mountains of parts that were no good. We built, we had an R&D storage area for stuff that we were never going to use. It was big. We're talking about a warehouse. Was that? That's it? Didn't even cover anything. Okay. Is there anything on this list of talking points that we really should talk about? where did the idea of the EV come from? We kind of talked about that. What was the design process like? Well, we're just talking about that. What set our product apart from competitors? Well, there wasn't any. It was pretty easy to differentiate ourselves from people that weren't there. That's changing now, but it's still slow coming. Why was innovation such a big part of Papa Bravo's success? Well, you know, I mean, it's all about problem solving, and you know, we never and creativity and engaging everybody. You know, like, I mean, some things I would be really negligent if I didn't say too. Is like, my belief is, you know, I mean, you have to make mistakes. Okay, you have to be comfortable with making mistakes. I mean, my entire existence and learning process, my entire life has been, it has to be about making mistakes. I mean, I have, like I say, I have a crappy high school diploma, so I don't have you know, formal training. How do I learn? I learn from allowing myself to screw up. You know, there's just a few rules that you gotta, you know, follow when you do that, and that is, don't be afraid to make a mistake, as long as you learn from the mistake. And I know you guys think, oh, this is obvious, yeah, but there's just some simple rules, and that is, allow yourself to make mistakes and learn from them. Allow yourself to make them twice, as long as you definitely learn from it the second time. And then, let me tell you, it drives home pretty fast on the second time, usually, depending. Make sure that the mistakes aren't of the size that will kill you. Okay, that's another qualifying step. Make sure that you're not going to go broke making the mistake, you know. But you know, where you got to get serious is try to never make that same mistake 3 times. You know, if you make that mistake 3 times, well, you didn't learn, so you're not following your own process, right? So making mistakes is important, and I think that that's a big downfall I see when I talk to a lot of people that are doing things like this, is that everybody wants to get it right the first time. It's so important that I get this thing right the first time, you know, because if I don't, I made a mistake and I don't look like I know what I'm doing. You know what? That really inhibits people from actually stretching out beyond what they are capable of doing. You know, and it doesn't have to be right. You just have to learn, because the truth of the matter is, some of the greatest things that we have created in Papa Bravo in terms of systems in vehicles and what we do are a result of discussions usually around something that blew up. You know, if you don't blow it up, where's the edge of the envelope? Okay, so you want to be innovative, you've got to blow up past the edge of the envelope on a regular basis. You just need to know that you're there and that you went over, and now you're not too far and you can steer back in without killing yourself, you know. But that's the important thing, is that if you're safe and you're afraid to screw up, okay, then you can't get to innovation, because innovation isn't within our comfortable zone. It's always outside, okay? You've got to be willing to go out into the minefield. And that's, you know, I like using metaphors, but that's what it is, man. As soon as you go beyond the edges of the fence, you know, into that unknown territory, that's where innovation lies, is out there. It's finding things that we didn't see before. And the other thing I would say is that that's really important, and I believe in this. There's a couple of things that I believe in pretty strongly that are kind of just more like almost philosophical things, and that is, one is everything's connected, you know. And I don't mean this in I mean, you can make it whatever you want, but I don't think of it so much in a spiritual way. I think of more of a mechanical way, and just to try and I think this is, to me, this is very, very important things to think about if you're going to try and create new things. You got to realize that, yeah, a lot of people say, well, nothing's new. You know, it's always been done. That isn't always true. It is true that if you look at planet Earth, I mean, how many, you guys will know this better than me, how many elements have we got on, come on, someone?
111, 131. I don't know.
Okay, good point. So if you look at that, so let's say 131. It doesn't matter what the number is, I don't really care. But the point is, that's not a big number, okay? But if you look at music, okay, music is Western music anyway, we'll stick with Western music. There's 12 tones in Western music, okay? All Western music has been written for hundreds and hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years, is combinations of 12 tones. Okay, all the music you like, all the music that people liked 500 years ago, is all based on 12 tones, okay? So think about that, okay? And then move that over and think about the elements. This is just a big ball of shit that's floating through space. That consists of 131 elements, right? Everything that we know, everything that anybody on the planet has ever known, and anything on the planet that anybody will ever know and create is some combination of those 131 items, okay? So, if that doesn't spell out something that's pretty clear, and that is that everything's connected. So, building an electric vehicle is just a different type of song than building a building, you know, or anything. It doesn't matter. I mean, even us. I mean, I think a lot of times, you know, you want to give me the hook, don't you?
No, we're good.
Anyway, I think that you know, like, I mean, it's important to realize that, I mean, there just isn't, to say there isn't anything new is true, because it's all a bunch of recycled crap, the entire planet, even us, you know, like we're just recycled materials, you know. So yeah, there isn't anything really new unless something pops in from outer space we haven't seen before, and that doesn't happen very often, or in large quantities. So, but the fact is that the combinations of those 131 items, well, there'll never be any end to new. I mean, yeah, I suppose mathematically you can find the end of new in terms of what that number would be of combinations, which is a pretty damn big number. Okay, and in all the lifetimes we could imagine from now, we won't hit the end of that. So new is all around us. It's old but new. It's all the same. You know, accounting and engineering and you know, cooking and all these things. It's all the same crap. You know, it's good. When I say crap, I don't mean that in a negative or disrespectful way. It's just, it's important. I mean, figure if simplicity is power, and especially when you're designing things or solutions. You know, simplicity is the holy grail. And so when you start looking at all these 131 elements out there, like Lego blocks in your tub, okay? You can assemble those things however you want, you know. Sure, there's things you don't want to put together because bad things happen. But once we know some of those things, and you can build anything, you can solve anything. Think outside, like if you're, I think it's really good. Cross-pollination of technology is something that I really, that's one of my favorite things. It's like taking stuff that doesn't belong here and putting it over here, because it doesn't seem to make sense, but sometimes you can find ways to use you know, materials and processes that are from, I can't think of a good example, which is unfortunate, but it's got to be a million of them. You know, plastics. Using plastics in places that they don't belong, using metals in places they don't belong, traditionally don't belong. I mean, it doesn't matter if it works, right? But a lot of times people think too much in silos of disciplines, you know? And I would always encourage everybody to try and generalize. It's good to specialize, but try and think generally, because the solutions, creativity is huge, you know. Like, and anyway, I don't have any big great ending statements, but I do, you know, some of that sounds a little wonky, or a little weird in terms of the philosophical side of things, but that is, if a person starts to think, the hardest part is to see the interconnectivity and to try and understand it. Like I was saying before, if I don't understand where something fits into this scheme, it's because I just don't understand it. I believe that it all makes, everything, again, if we vaporize everything, it turns back into those 131 different pieces. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. You take it all and put it in a box. You take it out and put it together, it makes a picture. Things don't always fit together, but most things do, even when we think that they don't. You just have to find the way to make it work.